Hey, let's dive right into today's topic, which is why I think you should focus on gross revenues in business and not net profit. For those of you who are watching me for the first time, my name is Nilly Willy, and I've been an entrepreneur with roughly 15 years in the game. I'm currently running a successful digital media company in the high six figures. If you're a regular guy trying to find some valuable information on entrepreneurship, personal finance, and positive mindset, I invite you to subscribe to my channel as I try to publish a new video every week. Now let's get started. Alright, so in today's video we're going to talk about what is gross revenues and why I personally think you should focus on gross revenues and not net profit. Now, first let's understand what is gross revenues and what is net profit. Gross revenues are basically just the high-end sales or money that comes in to your business every month. So, for example, if you run a marketing agency and you have 10 clients that bring in $10,000 a month each, so your gross revenue is $100K per month, right? That's the basic way to look at it. That's the amount of money that goes into your bank account every month before anything else, before you even spend a dime on employees and advertising or any other stuff, rent, office rent. That's your gross revenues for that month. So that's why it's called gross revenues, because it's before you cut out or spend any dollar. Now, what is net profit? Net profit is the amount of money you have left in your bank account after you remove certain expenses like employee salaries, office rent, advertising, or any other thing that you do to maintain your business. So for example, if you have $100,000 a month gross revenues, but you have salary for employees and office rent, and you spend a lot of money on advertising on Facebook or on Google or whatever, and after you spend all that money at the end of the month, you have, let's say, $40,000 left. So that will be your net profit for that month, right? So it's $100K gross revenues less $60K for that month on salaries and all your other expenses. That's left with $40K net profit. That's your net profit. Now, it's important to remember that a lot of times people calculate their net profit and before taxes, right? So usually you pay taxes for the taxes or tax for the government on your profit, not on your gross revenue. And the reason you do that is because you have expenses, right? And you don't pay the government before you pay your expenses, right? That's the logic of taxes, and it makes sense because if you earned gross revenues of $100,000 each month, but every month you have $60,000 in expense, you wouldn't have enough money left over if you pay your taxes on your gross revenues. That's why you pay taxes only on your net profit. All right. And obviously you exclude a few expenses that you cannot recognize, but most of the business expenses you can put in your yearly report, and that way your net profit shrinks. So when someone says I have $40,000 per month net profit, usually it means before taxes, right? So out of that $40,000 you made that month, you should allocate some of that for taxes depending on your level of income. All right, So now let's go into the 6 reasons I think you should focus on gross revenues and not net profit. So the number one reason I think you should focus on gross revenues and not net profit is that you have more control. Now let me explain. It's much easier to optimize your expenses to increase net profit than it is to increase your gross revenues. So for example, like we talked about before, if you have a monthly gross revenue of $100K and $60,000 in expense every month, it's much easier to optimize and utilize already what you have going on and maybe try and cut back on expenses. And let's say you're able to cut back $10K per month on expenses. So now your net profit grows to $50,000, right? So instead of $60,000 in expenses every month, now you have $50,000. So your net profit just increased by $10,000 per month. Now, usually that's a lot easier to do than trying to grow your gross revenues by $10K per month. It means you need to get a new client, or maybe even several, depending on the sales that you do. But usually it's much more efficient and easy to optimize your expenses to keep your net profit growing. So I would say you should focus on your gross revenues and increase that as much as you can. And when you reach a point when you earn enough, when you feel comfortable, try to optimize your expenses to grow your net profit. All right, reason number 2, I think you should focus on gross revenues and not net profit. So stability, right? What I mean by that is it's much more stable for a business to earn $100K a month, $150K a month with a net profit of $20,000 per month, $30,000 per month, than it is for a small business earning 10 or 15K per month in gross revenue with the same profit amount. Now, what I mean by that is that when you earn $10,000 per month, you probably only have like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 clients. So if one of them goes, that's 30% or more out of your gross revenues. But when you earn $100,000 or $150,000 per month as gross revenues, you probably have a lot of clients. It's much more stable. And if you lose 1 client or maybe even 2, you don't shrink by that much. So it's much more stable to have a high gross revenue company than it with a small net profit than it is to have a small gross revenues with the same amount of profit. Now again, this is my opinion, but I think it makes sense. All right, the third reason why I think you should focus on gross revenues is taxes. And what I mean by that is that you don't pay taxes on your gross revenues. You pay taxes on your net profit. Now, this is important to understand, especially for young entrepreneurs just starting out. You don't pay taxes on the money from your sales. All right, so if you have 2 clients and you make $10,000 per month, you don't have to pay taxes for $10,000 per month. Surely you have expenses. So you pay taxes on your net profit, which could be 50% of that or even more. So I think it's much more efficient and easy and profitable at the end of the day to focus on growing your gross revenues and then trying to optimize your expenses to maybe lower your net profit in a way that you also pay less taxes, but you keep your business growing. Now, that's an important part of this point. It really helps your business to grow when you have high gross revenues and low taxes. You keep a lot of the money inside your company by investing it back into the business. I'm not talking about just buying stupid stuff or spending it away. I'm talking about reinvesting the part of the gross revenues in your business to help it grow even further. So you can do that by hiring more people, or you can do that by increasing your spend on advertising, or you could go to conferences, or you could do more meetings. Whatever it is that you need to do to grow your business, you can use part of that gross revenue to do that, and that's basically tax-free, right? All right, so this next point is about attracting investors. So this is specifically to startups, but it could happen to any type of business probably. But if you have high gross revenues, then your company is instantly much more interesting to potential investors who might be interested in investing in your company and help you grow even further. So usually investors are not interested in one-man shows or really small businesses, and the way to be more appealing to those investors is by growing your gross revenues. If all you think about is how much I take home, how much is my net profit, you're not really thinking about expanding. When a company expands, usually it needs to spend, and spend a lot. So it's a good idea to increase your gross revenue on top of your net profit to maybe make your company more interesting and attract new investors that will put more money into your company and help you grow even further and maybe even explode. You never know. Okay, so the next point is similar to the previous one about investors, but this time I want to talk about attracting new clients. So, a lot of things in this world is like the herd mentality. So everyone has an iPhone, right? I'm shooting this with an iPhone. If I see a lot of people using an iPhone, I want to get that too. Now, it's just a basic human thing, human psychology, that when people see a lot of other people do something, immediately they attract to it. They want to talk about it. They want to figure out why are so many people doing this thing or buying this service or buying this iPhone. Maybe I should get it too. So when you increase your company gross revenues, when you grow, a lot of people are talking about you. You have more clients. Maybe it's your bank. Suddenly you have a lot of money rolling in. You have obviously a lot of expenses as well, but you get the ball rolling, and it will be easier to attract new clients when you have higher gross revenues, because it will make your company seem a lot bigger than it actually is. Even if your net profit is not that high, as long as your gross revenues are higher in this regard, it will be much easier to attract new clients, as they will want to see why are all these other companies working with you. Maybe your product is something that they need as well. Okay, so the last point I want to make about why it's important to focus on gross revenues and not net profit is the mindset, right? I talk a lot about mindset in my videos, and the last point I want to make on this video is that. So when you focus on gross revenues, usually you have a mentality of expansion, of growing. You want to grow the business. You focus on your sales. You focus on how much money you can reinvest in your company. So that's a very different mindset than focusing on net profit. When someone focuses on net profit, usually all he cares about is making a living, thinking about how much money can I take home from my business, and not really think about how much I can reinvest and grow further. So I like to think about gross revenues because I want to dominate, right? When I start a business, I want to dominate my sector. I want to grow fast. I want to explode. I want to have as much clients as I can and earn as much money as I can. That's the basic purpose of a business. You want to earn money. You want to dominate your sector. So that's a shift in your mindset when you first start a business. Don't think too small. Don't think, oh, I just want to make a living and I'm fine with that. I believe you should come with a domination point of view and try to take over your industry, right? You can always scale down. Let's say you do a good job and you have lots of clients and lots of money coming in and you don't like it. You can always scale down, but it's much more easy to grow fast and big and reinvest and then scale down than it is to try to grow with the wrong mindset. So the last point is just trying to shift your mindset about think big, try to dominate. Don't focus on how much money I'm taking home. Focus on how can I grow my business or startup as much as I can, and that means gross revenues. Now, a good example of a company that for years focused on gross revenues and not on their net profit is Amazon, right? If you think about Jeff Bezos, and he said it himself, I saw it in a documentary recently, he said it himself in the first few years, Amazon is not going to be profitable. We are not going to make a lot of money. We are going to sacrifice our profit, and our investors are going to sacrifice their profit for a few years at the beginning to dominate the sector. And as we all know, they did a great job, and probably Amazon right now is going to take over the world, but that's a topic for another video. But that is a great example of a company that's focusing on growth, on market domination and gross revenues other than net profit. If you look it up, you can see that in most years, Amazon didn't have much profit for the company. They had a huge gross revenues number, right? They make billions of dollars, but their net profit is very small and sometimes even negative, because they reinvest all that money back into the company and back into new markets and new products. And obviously it paid off big time. So that's just one example of a huge company that focused on gross revenues that made a big difference on this world. Think about that. Alright guys, that's it for today's video on why I think you should focus on gross revenues and not net profit. I hope you enjoyed it. It was kind of short, but I think to the point. If you liked it, please make sure you subscribe to my channel as I try to publish a new video every week. And I'll see you in the next video.